I saved money for months to buy tickets to her favorite concert, but when the day came and I reached holding them proudly, she had already gone inside with another boy, leaving me outside with 2 seats and a broken smile. I'm sitting in my car outside a 7-Eleven at 2 a.m., typing this on my phone cause I can't go home. Can't face the empty apartment, can't look at the couch where we used to watch Netflix. Can't see the kitchen table where I planned to surprise her with those concert tickets. God, those concert tickets. Let me back. My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that 6 months ago I was planning to propose to Sarah. She was everything I thought I wanted. Smart, funny, beautiful in that effortless way that made me feel lucky every single day. We'd been together 3 years, living together for 1, and I was so sure about our future that I'd already picked out the ring. Sarah loved this indie band called Velvet Midnight. Obsessed doesn't even cover it. She had their posters on our bedroom wall, knew every lyric, followed their tour updates religiously. When they announced a surprise concert in our city with only 200 tickets available, I knew I had to get them. Not just any tickets, front row seats. The works. I worked double shifts at the warehouse for 2 months. Skipped lunches, sold my gaming console, borrowed money from my brother. Those tickets cost me $800 each. $1,600 I didn't have, for 2 pieces of paper that I thought would make her the happiest woman alive. The plan was perfect. I'd surprise her at work with the tickets, we'd go to the concert that night, and during her favorite song, I'd get down on one knee right in the crowd. The ring was already in my pocket when I drove to her office that Tuesday afternoon. But when I got there her coworker Jess looked confused. Sarah left early today, she said. Said she had somewhere important to be. My stomach dropped, but I told it was fine. Maybe she went home sick. Maybe she had a doctor's appointment she forgot to mention. I called her phone, straight to voicemail. I drove home, empty apartment, her work clothes were gone, replaced by the dress I'd bought her for her birthday. The black one that made her look like she belonged on magazine covers. Her good perfume was missing from the bathroom counter. That's when the paranoia crept in. Where was she? Why was she dressed? Why wasn't she answering her phone? I drove to the venue. Told I was being crazy. Told there was a logical explanation. The concert didn't start for 3 hours, but there were already people lined outside. Young, hip, the kind of crowd Sarah would fit right into. I parked across the street and waited, watched. Felt like a but couldn't help. Then I saw her. She was walking toward the entrance with someone. A guy, tall, skinny, wearing one of those vintage bandy shirts that cost more than my work boots. Beard perfectly trimmed, hair artfully messy. He looked like he belonged in Sarah's world in a way I never did. They weren't just walking together. She was holding his arm, laughing at something he said, looking at him the way she used to look at me. The way that made me feel 10 feet tall and bulletproof. I watched them disappear into the venue. Watched her go to the concert I'd worked to exhaustion to afford. With someone who probably got his tickets without breaking a sweat. I sat in that car for 4 hours. Held those 2 front row tickets in my shaking hands and listened to muffled music bleeding through the venue walls. Music I'd paid for her to hear. Music she was hearing with him. My phone buzzed around 10 p.m. A text from Sarah, working late tonight, probably won't be home until really late. Love Pa. I screenshotted that message. Don't know why. Maybe because I knew it would be the last time she'd say those words to me. Maybe because I needed proof that this was really happening. When I finally drove home I found her Instagram story. Videos from inside the concert. Her hands in the air, singing along, pure joy on her face. And in the corner of one video for just a second I could see him. The guy she'd gone with. His hand on her back. She came home at 2 a.m., reeking of cigarettes and someone else's cologne. I pretended to be asleep. She slipped into bed next to me and I lay there staring at the ceiling, those concert tickets still in my jacket pocket, trying to figure out how my perfect plan had become my worst nightmare. The next morning, she was different. Distant. She made coffee for herself but not for me, something she'd done automatically for 3 years. When I asked about her work emergency, she gave vague answers and changed the subject. I should have confronted her then. Should have demanded the truth. Instead, I did something worse. I started investigating. I went through her phone while she showered. Found messages with someone named Jake, going back 3 weeks. Nothing explicitly inappropriate, but the tone was all wrong. Flirty, intimate. The kind of messages send someone are falling for, not someone to just Instagram. Jake Morrison, 28, music journalist and part-time philosopher. Everything I wasn't. Educated, cultured, the kind of guy who used words like dialectical in casual conversation. His feed was full of concert photos, album reviews, pictures from coffee shops I never heard of. In his recent photos I found her. Sarah in the background of a from some underground music venue. Sarah tagged in a post about discovering new artists with good company. Sarah. Woven into his like she belonged there. 3 months of this. 3 months of me working extra hours to save for a ring while she was falling for someone else. 3 months of her lying to my face while I planned our future. The rational part of my brain knew I should end it. Pack my things, have an adult conversation, walk away with whatever dignity I had left. But I wasn't rational anymore. I was desperate, devastated, and I made the stupidest decision of my. I decided to for her in the worst possible way. I created an Instagram account, started following Jake, commenting on his post, building a persona as someone who shared his interests. Someone cultured and intelligent and everything Sarah seemed to want. It was pathetic. I spent hours researching indie bands I'd never heard of, reading pretentious album reviews, crafting comments that would make me seem like I belonged in their world. I told I was gathering intelligence trying to understand what she saw in him. But really I was losing my mind. The account worked too well. Jake started following me back, engaging with my posts, even deeming about music recommendations. I was catfishing the guy my girlfriend was cheating on me with, and the worst part was how easy it was to pretend to be someone she might actually love. For 2 weeks, I lived this double. Warehouse worker by day, intellectual by night. I learned more about Obscuric in those 14 days than I had in my entire. Started listening to the bands Sarah loved, trying to understand what I'd been missing. That's when I realized the horrible truth: Jake wasn't the problem. I was. Sarah wasn't leaving me for Jake specifically. She was leaving me for the kind of person Jake represented. Someone who shared her passions, understood her references, could keep with her mind. Someone who belonged in her world instead of dragging her down to mine. I'd spent 3 years trying to make her happy in my world instead of learning to exist in hers. I'd bought her concert tickets instead of learning why the music mattered to her. I'd planned to propose during her favorite song without ever asking what made it her favorite. The realization should have been my wake call, should have pushed me to be honest, to have the conversation we both needed. Instead it pushed me to do something unforgivable. I used that account to ask Jake to meet. Told him I was new in town, needed someone to show me the local music scene. He suggested a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place with exposed brick and baristas who looked like they'd stepped out of alternative magazines. I went, sat in the corner booth, watching Jake wait for someone who would never show. Watch him check his phone, order a second coffee, finally leave after an hour. I followed him home. I know how that sounds. I know what her thinking and her right. I'd crossed every line, every boundary, become someone I didn't recognize, but I couldn't stop. I found out where Jake worked, a small independent record store that specialized in vinyl. I started around outside watching his routine, learning his schedule. I told I was protecting Sarah, making sure this guy was worthy of her. Really, I was planning something terrible. Jake worked alone most afternoons. The store was usually empty except for the occasional customer browsing the used section. It would be easy to corner him, to make him understand that Sarah was taken, to scare him away from I bought a baseball bat. Kept it in my car. Told I'd only use it to him, just enough to make him back off. But every time I worked the courage to actually confront him, I'd see Sarah's face in my mind. Not angry or scared, but disappointed. The way she'd look at me if she knew what I'd become. So instead of confronting Jake, I went home and confronted Sarah. It was a Thursday night. She was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, probably texting him. I sat down next to her with those concert tickets in my hand. I bought these for, I said, setting them on the coffee table between us. She looked confused. What are these? Front row tickets to Velvet Midnight. The concert went to last week, with Jake. The color drained from her face. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. How did, she started. I was there. I watched going with him while I sat in my car with the tickets I'd worked 2 months to afford. She started crying then. Not pretty tears, but guilty sobs that confirmed everything I already knew. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. But it did happen, I said. Chose him over me, lied to me, made me feel crazy for wondering why we're pulling away. I know. I've been horrible. I don't know how to explain it. Try. She took a shaky breath. Understands parts of me that don't. We connect on things that matter to me. Music, books, ideas. With him, I feel like I can be completely pint, and with me, I feel like I have to be smaller, simpler, like my interests don't matter because don't share them. The words hit like physical blows. Because they were true. I had dismissed her passions, rolled my eyes at her, pretentious, music, changed the subject when she tried to talk about books I hadn't read. I could learn. I said desperately. I could be interested in the music, reading about the bands I could be. What need? She shook her head sadly. That's not how it works. Can't compatibility. And shouldn't have to deserve someone who loves exactly as are. I love exactly as are. No, love the version of me that fits into, the version that watches football with and doesn't mind when ignore the things I care about. I wanted to argue but I couldn't. Because she was right about everything. So what now? I asked. I don't know. I do, but I'm in love with him, month, maybe more. I tried to it but he's better than me. He's different than, not better, different enough that chose him. She nodded, tears still falling. I'm sorry. I should have been honest with from the beginning. Deserved that. I picked the concert tickets, these pieces of paper that had started everything. I was gonna propose to, at the concert during favorite song. Her face crumpled. God, the ring. That's why I've been working so much. I nodded. It's in my sock drawer. Has been for 3 weeks. We both sat there crying then. For what we'd had, what we'd lost, what we'd never be able to fix. I'll move out, she said finally. Give space to process this. I owe that much. Don't do it for me, I said. Do it because want to be with him. I do want to be with him. But I also want to be okay. Won't be okay. Not for a long time. Maybe not ever. She reached for my hand but I pulled away. Don't, please. She packed a bag that night while I sat in the kitchen, staring at those concert tickets and trying to figure out where everything went wrong. When she left, she my forehead like I was a child she was tucking into bed. I really did love, she whispered. Past tense. Past tense. The door closed behind her, and I was alone with the echo of her goodbye and the weight of my own failures. I should have let her go. Should have deleted her number, blocked her social media, started the long process of healing. Instead I did the thing that would destroy both of our lives forever. I kept the Instagram account, kept talking to Jake, and 3 days after Sarah moved out I used everything I'd learned about him to plan my revenge. The plan was simple, elegant and completely insane. I was going to them both. Thanks for all the messages on my last post. Some have told me to get therapy, others said Sarah got what she deserved. A few called me pathetic. Or alright, but have no idea how much worse this gets. I need to tell the rest of this story before I lose my nerve. Before I chicken out and delete everything. Someone needs to know what happens when let pain turn into a monster. After Sarah left, I had 3 days alone in our apartment. 3 days to think, to plan to let my ferment into something. I called in sick to work, ordered takeout and spent every waking hour on my phone, crafting the perfect revenge. The Instagram account I'd made to catfish Jake had become something else entirely. Through weeks of conversation I'd learned everything about him. His insecurities, his dreams, his fears. He told Marcus. Things he probably hadn't told anyone else. Jake was adopted, never knew his birth parents. It was his deepest wound, the thing that kept him at night wondering who he really was. He'd confided this to my persona during a late night conversation about identity and belonging. He also had anxiety about his writing. Despite his confident exterior, he was terrified that his music reviews were pretentious garbage, that he was who'd been lucky so far. He'd shared drafts of articles with Marcus, asking for feedback, desperate for validation from someone he thought understood art. And here's the thing that makes me most: Jake was a good guy. Not perfect, not without flaws, but genuinely kind. He'd offered to help Marcus find an apartment, suggested we grab coffee to discuss music, even offered to introduce me to other people in the scene. The guy my girlfriend left me for was trying to be a friend to the person I'd created to destroy him. But I was too broken to see his humanity. All I saw was the man who'd stolen my future. My plan was surgical. I was going to use everything Jake had told me to systematically destroy his, piece by piece. Make him lose his job, his confidence, his sense of self. Make Sarah see him fall apart and realize she'd left a stable relationship for someone who couldn't handle real pressure. It started small. I created anonymous accounts and began trolling Jake's articles online. Not obvious stuff that could be traced back to me, but subtle undermining. Comments that echoed his deepest insecurities, criticism that hit exactly where he was most vulnerable. Another pretentious review, someone who thinks using big words makes him deep. This reads like someone trying way too hard to sound intellectual. Does this guy actually like music, or does he just like the sound of his own voice? I watched his confidence crumble in real time through his text to Marcus. He starts second guessing every article, asking for more and more feedback, questioning whether he was any good at his job. Then I escalated. I found out Jake was working on a big piece for a local music magazine, a profile of an coming band that could make or break his career as a serious music journalist. He'd mentioned it to dozens of times, how important this assignment was, how it could open doors for him. So I sabotaged it. I contacted the band directly, pretending to be from a competing magazine. Told them Jake had been badmouthing them online, that he was planning a hit piece to boost his own profile. I showed them screenshots of conversations I doctored, made it look like Jake had called their music derivative trash, and said they were own hit wonders with no real talent. The band canceled the interview, told Jake's editor that he's unprofessional and they refused to work with him. The magazine pulled the assignment and started questioning Jake's other work. Jake was devastated. He texted Marcus for hours that night, wondering what he'd done wrong, how everything had fallen apart so quickly. I comforted him. Told him it wasn't his fault. Offered to help him figure out what happened. I was disguised as medicine and I was loving every second of it. But that wasn't enough. I wanted Sarah to see him fail. Wanted her to doubt her choice. So I went after his record store job too. I spent a week learning everything I could about the store's inventory, their suppliers, their customer base. Then I created a customer complaint campaign. Different accounts, different stories, but all painting Jake as rude, incompetent, someone who looked down on customers who didn't share his taste in music. I wrote detailed reviews about how Jake had been condescending when I asked about popular albums, how he'd rolled his eyes at my questions, how he'd made me feel for not knowing some obscure band. I created an elaborate fiction about him refusing to help elderly customers, claiming he'd told a woman that her taste in music was embarrassing. The complaints were surgical strikes designed to hit exactly what his boss would care about most: customer service and sales. Within 2 weeks, Jake was called in for a meeting about his attitude. Within 3 weeks, he was on probation. He had no idea what was happening to him. His was falling apart and he couldn't understand why. Every text to Marcus was more desperate, more confused. He started questioning whether he was actually a terrible person, whether everyone had been lying to him about being decent. I was systematically destroying someone's sense of self, and I felt justified, righteous, like I was balancing some cosmic scale. But the worst part wasn't what I was doing to Jake. It was what I was doing to Sarah. I followed her. Not physically but digitally. Watched her social media, tracked her location when she posted stories, learned her new routine. She was staying with a friend while looking for her own place, trying to give Jake and me both space to process everything. Through her posts I could see she was struggling too. She looked tired, sad, like the weight of what she'd done was crushing her. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me wanted to reach out and comfort her. The rational part of me knew I should all contact, delete her number, block her everywhere. But I wasn't rational anymore. I was addicted to the pain of watching her move on, masochistically scrolling through evidence of my own replacement. Then I saw the photo that broke me completely. Sarah and Jake at some coffee shop downtown. She was laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his arm, looking happier than I'd seen her in months. Not the tired, guilty Sarah I'd been watching struggle with her choices, but the bright, alive Sarah I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago. She looked free. Like leaving me had lifted some weight I didn't even know I'd been putting on her. That photo made me realize something terrible: my revenge wasn't working. Jake's professional was crumbling, his confidence was shattered, but Sarah still loved him, maybe even loved him more for being vulnerable, for needing her support. I wasn't breaking them, I was bonding them together through shared adversity, so I decided to get more direct. I used Jake's confessions about his adoption to create a DNA ancestry account, spent days researching genealogy websites, learning how they worked, understanding their processes. Then I created an elaborate fiction about Jake's birth family. Through the Marcus account, I started dropping hints about having done some family research, about finding interesting connections in adoption records. Jake was immediately interested. The topic of his origins was his biggest vulnerability, his deepest need. I told him I'd found records suggesting his birth mother had been in contact with the adoption agency, looking for him, that she'd left information about wanting to reconnect when he was ready. Jake was electrified. He begged Marcus to help him find her, offered to pay for any research, any travel costs. His whole world suddenly revolved around this possibility of connection, of finally understanding where he came from. I let him hope for 2 weeks. Built an elaborate story about a woman named Patricia Morrison in Oregon who'd been searching for the son she'd given in 1995. Created social media profiles for her, a whole family history, photos that could plausibly be related to Jake. Then I arranged for them to meet. I told Jake that Patricia was coming to town for work and wanted to meet him at a restaurant downtown. Gave him an address, a time, told him she'd be wearing a red scarf and carrying a book. Jake was beside himself with excitement and terror. He texted Marcus, constantly asking for advice, sharing his fears and hopes. He bought new clothes for the meeting. Got a haircut. Practiced what he would say to the mother he'd never known. Sarah went with him for moral support. I watched from across the street as they sat in the restaurant, Jake checking his phone every few minutes, scanning every woman who walked in, hope and anxiety written all over his face. Patricia never came, of course. Because Patricia never existed. After 2 hours Jake finally accepted that he'd been stood. I watched him break down in the restaurant, Watched Sarah hold him while he cried. Watched her try to comfort him as his last hope of finding his family crumbled. They left together, Jake looking destroyed, Sarah looking angry and protective. I followed them back to Jake's apartment, watched through his window as Sarah helped him process what had happened. That's when the full weight of what I'd done hit me. I wasn't just destroying Jake's career or his confidence anymore. I was torturing him with false hope about the deepest wound in his. I was using his most vulnerable dream to inflict maximum psychological damage. I was a monster, but I still wasn't done. The next morning, I sent Jake one final message from Marcus. Told him I'd heard from Patricia that she was sorry about missing the meeting, but that she decided she wasn't ready to reconnect after all. That she wished him well but never wanted to see him again. Jake's response was a single word. I stared at that message for an hour before responding. Some people just aren't meant to be found. Then I deleted the Marcus account and every trace of the Patricia Morrison I'd created, wiped away Jake's last connection to the fantasy family I'd built for him and then destroyed. But deleting the accounts didn't delete what I'd done. Within days the consequences of my campaign started cascading beyond anything I'd planned. Jake lost his job at the record store. His boss finally decided the customer complaints were too much of a liability. Without steady income, Jake couldn't afford his apartment. He had to move back in with his college roommate, sleeping on a couch, 30 years old and starting over from nothing. The magazine blacklisted him after the band incident. Other publications heard whispers about his own professionalism. His freelance work dried. His dream of being a music journalist was over. Worst of all, the family reunion had broken something fundamental in him. Jake became obsessed with adoption again, but now it was poisoned with suspicion. He questioned every lead, every possibility, convinced that anyone who claimed to have information was lying to him. He developed trust issues that went beyond family searches. He started questioning Sarah's motive, wondering if she was going to abandon him like everyone else had. Their relationship became strained under the weight of his newfound paranoia. Sarah tried to be supportive, but I could see through her social media that it was taking a toll. She looked exhausted, frustrated, like she was drowning in someone else's pain and couldn't understand where it was coming from. That should have been enough for me. I'd won. Jake was broken, their relationship was struggling, Sarah was miserable. I'd gotten my revenge. But revenge is and I was addicted. The pain I was causing had become the only thing that made my own pain bearable. So when I saw them still trying to work things out, still fighting for their relationship despite everything I'd thrown at them, I decided to escalate one final time. I decided to make Sarah think Jake was cheating on her. I created a new account, this time as a woman named Jessica. Young, attractive, into all the same music Jake loved. I started commenting on his posts, liking his photos, engaging with him in ways that could be interpreted as flirtatious. Jake, isolated and desperate for any positive attention, responded gratefully. He farted conversations with her about music and nothing inappropriate, just the kind of friendly interaction that would look suspicious to an insecure girlfriend. Then I had Jessica start messaging Jake more directly, asking for music recommendations, sharing personal stories, gradually building the kind of emotional intimacy that crosses relationship boundaries. I knew exactly which buttons to push. Jake was lonely, professionally destroyed, questioning everything about himself. He was vulnerable to attention from someone who seemed to understand his passion for music, who didn't judge him for his failures. Within a week, Jake was texting Jessica constantly. Not romantic messages, but the kind of deep personal conversations that partners are supposed to have with each other. He was emotionally confiding in a stranger while pulling away from Sarah. Then I arranged for Sarah to find out. I had Jessica suggest meeting at a coffee shop, the same one where I'd watched Jake and Sarah look happy together weeks earlier. I made sure to post about the meeting on Jessica's Instagram story, tagging the location. Sarah saw the story, recognized the coffee shop as Jake's favorite place, saw a beautiful woman posting about meeting someone there and put the pieces together. She confronted Jake about Jessica that night. I know because Jake immediately messaged Jessica about it, confused and defensive. He insisted nothing inappropriate was happening, that Jessica was just a friend who understood his interests. But the damage was done. Sarah had already been struggling with Jake's paranoia and neediness after his family disappointment. Now she was questioning whether he was being faithful, whether he was seeking emotional support from other women instead of working on their relationship. They had a massive. Sarah accused Jake of emotional cheating. Jake accused Sarah of being jealous and controlling. Both of them were wrong about the details but right about their underlying fears. Their relationship was falling apart, and neither of them understood why. They escalated until Sarah stormed out. She went back to her friend's place and didn't speak to Jake for 3 days. During those 3 days, Jake spiraled completely. He messaged Jessica constantly, seeking validation, asking if he was a bad person, wondering if Sarah was right to be suspicious of their friendship. I comforted him through Jessica's account, told him Sarah was being unfair, suggested maybe he deserved someone who trusted him more, planted seeds of doubt about whether Sarah was really the right person for him. It was emotional manipulation at its most cruel. I was using a persona to destroy Jake's relationship from the inside, making him question the woman he loved while she questioned him. On the 3rd day, Sarah came back to talk things through. She wanted to work on their problems, to rebuild the trust that had been damaged. She loved Jake despite everything that had gone wrong and she was willing to for them. But Jake had spent 3 days being poisoned by Jessica's influence. He was defensive, angry, convinced that Sarah would never really trust him. The conversation went badly. They both said things they couldn't take back. Sarah left again. This time it looked permanent. I watched it all unfold through social media and Jake's messages to Jessica. Watched two people who loved each other destroy themselves because they couldn't see the puppet master pulling their strings. That night, Jake sent Jessica a long, rambling message about how everyone in his eventually left him. His birth parents, his adoptive parents who'd died in a car accident when he was in college, now Sarah. He wondered if there was something fundamentally wrong with him, something that made him unlovable. I stared at that message for hours. This broken, desperate man pouring his heart out to someone who didn't exist, begging for reassurance from the person who'd systematically destroyed his. And that's when I finally understood what I'd become. I wasn't getting revenge on someone who'd stolen my girlfriend. I was torturing someone whose only crime was being loved by someone I couldn't keep. Jake hadn't pursued Sarah. She'd pursued him. He hadn't tried to break us. She'd already been pulling away from me long before they met. Jake was just a guy who'd fallen in love with someone who fell in love with him back. And for that I'd destroyed his career, his home, his family hopes, and now his relationship. I'd become the villain in everyone's story, including my own. But even then, even with that realization burning in my chest, I couldn't stop. Because stopping would mean facing what I'd done, taking responsibility, admitting that I'd spent months systematically torturing an innocent person. So instead of stopping, I decided to finish it. I deleted the Jessica account without explanation. No goodbye, no closure, just vanished like Patricia Morrison had. Left Jake wondering what he'd done wrong, why another person had abandoned him without explanation. Then I sent Sarah an anonymous message with screenshots of Jake's conversations with Jessica. Out of context, edited to look as damaging as possible. Made it seem like Jake had been having an emotional affair, that he'd been badmouthing Sarah to another woman, that Jessica had ended things because she didn't want to be part of breaking a relationship. Sarah was devastated. The screenshots confirmed her worst fears about Jakey's faithfulness. She blocked his number, deleted him from social media, told her friends that he'd been cheating. Jake had no way to explain or defend himself. Jessica had disappeared, the screenshots looked damning, and Sarah wouldn't take his calls. His version of events sounded like the desperate lies of a caught cheater. Within a week their relationship was completely over. No chance of reconciliation, no possibility of working things out. I'd made sure of that. I'd won. And I felt absolutely nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no relief. Just a hollow emptiness where my anger used to be. Like I'd been running on rage for so long that I'd forgotten what normal emotions felt like. Jake moved away 2 weeks later. Couldn't afford to stay in the city without work. Couldn't handle running into Sarah everywhere he went. He took a job at his uncle's shop in another state, gave on music journalism entirely. Sarah started therapy. I know because she posted about it once, something about needing help processing betrayal and learning to trust again. She looked exhausted in every photo, like the last few months had aged her years, and me. I went back to my empty apartment, back to my warehouse job. Back to that I had before Sarah, but with the added weight of knowing what I was capable of when someone me. I kept Jake's final message to Jessica. I don't understand why everyone leaves. What's wrong with me? I read it sometimes when I want to remember what I did, what I am, because nothing was wrong with Jake. The problem was me. I destroyed 3 lives because I couldn't handle being left. Because I could accept that sometimes love isn't enough, that sometimes people grow apart, that sometimes the person loved finds someone who fits them better. Instead of dealing with my pain like an adult, I became a monster. Instead of letting Sarah go and wishing her happiness, I made sure she'd never be happy with anyone. I turned heartbreak into a weapon and used it to down everything in my path.